Now that we've used the bridge tool to create the power units, you have all of the tools necessary to create the next couple of items as well. So instead of me running you through every single loop, slice and bevel, what I'm going to do is kind of hit the main points in their creation. If I come across any problems or kind of interesting techniques along the way, I'll definitely cover them in more detail. But I really want to get onto the screen object where we're going to be using some new tools which you can use in your other models and things like that. So we're going to begin with the back section. So if we zoom into the battery section here, you can see that we've essentially got these two different parts. We've got this large control knob up here, which is this large red circle, and then we've got this kind of extended semicircular shape down here. So what I'm going to do is start off by creating two circles using the cylinder tool. I'm going to create this top one, and then I'm going to create this bottom one as well. And at the moment this bottom one will just overlap this section here. So I'm going to do that and come back. So I've now created these two circles here. This one has 32 edges and this one has 16 edges. Now the next step is to draw an edge across this bottom one. We're going to split it in half by deleting that top polygon. Now with them both selected, we need to move them into position. So going to the side view, I'm going to move, first of all, both of them on the Z-axis until this top one is roughly in position there. Then I'll move this one here back so it's against the pedal. Now it's just a case of giving these some thickness. So what I'm going to do is select the polygon and use the bevel tool to bevel it out to this edge, and then do the same one to this edge. With that done, we can now rotate this top section into position, so something like that. You'll notice that this top edge is tapered slightly, so we need to select this outer ring, and with the scale tool we're just going to scale that down slightly, like that. With that done, we need to create the rest of this shape here. So I'm going to go to the perspective mode, grab this top polygon and bevel it up underneath the pedal top. With that done, I'm going to hit delete, grab these two front polygons, go to our reference image, and I'm going to inset them in so they match that hole. Now if I go to perspective mode, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and you'll see that we've created this extra polygon that we don't need. So I'm going to select it and delete it, then grab this edge and move it up. Now all that's left to do is bevel this in. So I'm going to go to the bevel tool and just inset that in. Now I'm going to go in quite far, so through the pedal, and hit delete. And you'll notice that it gives us a problem because there's no hole in the actual pedal itself. So I'm going to come over here to the main body layer and add in some extra loop slices. So I'm going to add one there, and then come up to the top, add another one, and one more around the bottom here. I'm going to set this to 1, pull down until that's a loop. And we can select this face and delete it. Now all that's left is just to tweak this slightly, so I'm going to pull this up. And now all we need to do is bevel the edges and we'll be done. And after beveling the edges, the back section is now complete. Now we're kind of getting a little bit of a smoothing error down here, so I'm just going to add in one more edge. So select the main body layer, I'm just going to pull one extra edge down there, like that. And that gets rid of our smoothing errors. So now we're going to move on to this top pad section. After saving the scene, the first thing we need to do is create the indent for this pad section to sit in. So with the pedal top layer selected, I'm going to activate the slice tool, which is Shift C, and add in 2 extra edges just outside the yellow pedal pad. With that done, we can now select that polygon, and in perspective mode we're going to bevel it in slightly to add the extra set of polygons surrounding it. I'll bevel it in again and then shift it down into the pedal. We only want to go a small distance with that. Now what I'm going to do is bevel all of these edges in with a round level of 0. With the bevel completed, you can see because we added that extra group of polygons surrounding the inset, we get a nice edge here full of quads and tri. For the pad itself, I've created a new mesh layer called Pad, and I'm going to come up to the basic menu and click on the cube tool and draw out the basic shape. Once you're happy with that, I'm going to hit space to drop it and select the poly. We'll then go into perspective mode so we can move and rotate this into position just above the pedal top, so it sits nicely in the indent. When you're happy with that, go to a side view and you want to bevel it up to create the shape. So I'm going to bevel once to just above the pedal top layer, shift click and bevel again to meet the top of the pad itself. We want to inset this last bevel slightly so that we match these edges. When you're happy with that, hit space to drop the tool, and now if we go to the top view, you'll see that these edges are nicely rounded, so we need to grab all of these edges that make up the top pad. So I'm just lassoing select with shift held down, and then going to bevel them in with a round level of 2. So you want to get that bevel up the round level to about 2, and then you can drag until it looks right. Now you notice when I did that, if I hit space to drop the tool, this top polygon has a shading error on it. So I'm going to grab it, inset it slightly, to add that extra group of polygons around it, which you see gets rid of the shading error. Now I'm going to shift click and inset it one more time, and before I drop the tool I'm going to come up to vertex and click on join averaged, which gives us a nice top to that pedal pad. Now that's all that's left to do is double click this edge loop and this edge loop and give them a beveled edge slightly so they catch the light in the render, but with a round level of 0. Now with the main body of the pad done, we need to go and grab the boss logo from the bottom and position it on top of the pad here using the reference images. So as you can see, I went into the boss logo layer and selected the polygons. I then copied them and pasted them back into the pad layer, and I've used the rotate, move and scale tools to position them according to the reference. With that, the pedal pad is done. So with the scene saved, we're going to move on to creating the screws that will be on either side of this pedal top object. So I've made a new mesh layer called screws. I'm going to hide all of the other layers apart from the refs. I'm going to go into the side view and see what we're creating. Now notice we have two parts. We have this cross section in the middle and a cylinder that makes up the main body of the screw. And the problem is, how do we connect them both together? But this was actually pretty similar to the problem we had down here with the power blocks. We had this section of mesh in the middle that we needed to connect to this outer section. And the important thing to remember was that this bit had to have the same number of edges in it as this outer section here. So the same actually applies for the screws. So I'm going to go to the left view. And we're going to start off by making this cross section of the main screw. So I'm going to come up to the basic menu and click on the cube tool. I'm just going to drag out a single poly in the middle of the cross like that. And when you're happy, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and F to flip it. We can then zoom in because we don't need the reference for the minute. I'm going to select both of these edges, Z for the edge extend tool, right click, and I'm going to activate the scale tool and scale them out. I'm then going to repeat this for both of these edges. So Z, right click, scale tool, and scale them out. So we're looking for them all to be about the same size. With that done, I'm going to go into perspective mode and we can start beveling this in. So I'm going to double click to select them all, B for the bevel tool. I'm going to inset it once so we get the polys around the outside. Shift click, inset it again and pull it in slightly to create that top bevel. Shift click again and pull it in even further. Then we're going to shift click one more time and create that final bevel like that. Now all that's left to do is select all of these side edges and give them a bevel. So I've now beveled in all of these side edges. I'm going to select this middle poly and press Shift up arrow on my keyboard, which will select all of these bottom polys. I'm going to hit the B key for bevel, just insert this one last time, and then delete them. I'm going to double click that edge loop and hit P to create a new polygon in there, and then I'm going to go in and start creating some quads. With that done, we now have this layout. We've got a tiny polygon at the very end, and this large one in the middle, and these guys in the very middle of the screw section. So we're ready to create our screw main body, so I'm going to zoom out, come up here to the cylinder tool, and click and drag from the middle of the cross. And we want both of these values to be the same, so I'm going to set them to 3. We want our side to be about 32 on this one. That will give us enough detail to work with. When you're happy with the position, I'm going to switch to a back view. I'm going to click and drag on this red cross to give us some width. Now by default these segments are set to 12, which gives us a lot of extra edges down here, so we want to set this back to 1 if it's not already, which gives us this one polygon along the width. And when you're happy, I'm going to press space to drop the tool and go back to perspective mode. I'm going to grab this front poly and we're going to inset it in slightly, just so it's slightly bigger than our cross, and I'll then delete it. Now at the moment this edge loop has 32 edges, and this edge loop that we need to connect it to has 24. So clearly we need to add some extra edges to this one, and it works out that we need to add 2 extra edges running vertically, and 2 running horizontally. So I'm going to hit the Alt-C key for the loop slice tool and right click, and then I'm going to set the count to 2, hit space to drop the tool, and then if I select this edge loop, you see we've now got 32 edges down there as well. So I'm going to select this guy as well, come up here to the polygon tool, polygon menu, and click on the bridge tool. I'll then right click, and you see everything is a little bit messed up, like I mentioned it might be earlier. So what I'm going to do is come over and try the reverse orient option, and things suddenly look an awful lot better. So that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Then we can just bevel this edge slightly. So I'm going to hit B for bevel and bevel it out. But we want a little bit more detail than that, so I'm going to set that to 2. And that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to bevel this edge as well, but with a round level of 0, because we don't need as much detail on that one. I'm going to grab this back poly, inset it in slightly, and then delete it. Now it's just a case of moving our screw into position. So I'm going to double click it and go to the front view. We actually want this one to be over here as it's facing that direction. So that looks pretty good, but I'm going to bring back our main body just so I can make sure it lines up on our pedal top layer. And that looks pretty good to me. So if I go to perspective view, you'll see that our screw's in place. Now I'm just going to randomize this slightly by rotating it on the X axis. Then we need to copy it to the other side, and a quick way to do that would be to mirror it on the X axis. And we can do that in the duplicate menu using the mirror tool. Now if you want to change axis with this, it's down here under mirror generator, and you've got the X, the Y, and the Z. If I was to right click to activate it in the viewport, it changes the mirror center to wherever you right click. Now at the moment it's set up so it's right along the origin, which is where we want it, so I'm just going to click apply. And you see we now get another screw on this side as well. So that's the screws done. So after saving the scene, we're going to go ahead and create the jack inputs. Now I've created a new mesh layer called jack inputs over here in the items list. I'm now going to zoom in and take a look at what it is we're modeling. And what you should notice is that it in fact consists of 3 cylinders. You have this outer one, which is this washer. You have this 6-sided cylinder, which then screws onto this middle cylinder that runs into the middle of the pedal. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create this back washer and this 6-sided cylinder that sits on top of it, and then we'll discuss how to get this one to run through the middle. So I've gone ahead and created and positioned those cylinders using the cylinder tool in the basic menu, and I've also beveled the front and back edges on both of them. And I'm just about to start beveling these edges, so I'm going to select this one, shift click this one, and then I'm going to tap the up arrow on my keyboard to continue selecting in that pattern. With that done, I'm going to hold down shift and double click to select all of these edge loops, and then I'm going to bevel with a round level of 2. And about there looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Now, this cylinder started off with 6 sides, which means that any cylinder running through it is going to have a number of edges that is divisible by 6. Just as down here on the power section, we had a 4-sided shape, and this had an edge loop containing 32 edges, which is divisible by 4. So whatever you're trying to connect to, like this, the inner object has got to have a number of edges that is divisible by the number of sides of this outer object. And that's kind of the general rule in this situation. It will make things a bit easier. I'm going to start by hiding our main body layer, which will make things a bit clearer, and then I'm going to switch to a left view and start drawing out this cylinder. So I'm going to click and drag in the middle here. And you notice we can't see anything, and that's because it's hiding behind the cylinders that we just created. So I'm going to move that out a little bit, go back to a left view, and then I can move that into position. Now we want both of these radiuses to be the same, so about 4.2 looks pretty good for what we want. We want to kind of get it to just about the outside of this black line here. With that done, we want to pay attention to the number of sides. Now remember, it's got to be a number that's divisible by 6, and 48 is divisible by 6, so this should join up easily later on. With that done, I'm going to drop the tool and switch into the perspective view. So I'm going to flip this polygon around, select this one and delete it, and then we need to move this one into position. So I'm going to go to a back view and just drag this like that. With that in position, I'm going to go to perspective view and drop the tool. And now you notice that this edge loop only has 30 edges in it, so we have 18 edges to add in. Now we have 6 sides to add edges onto, and 18 divided by 6 is 3, so we want to add 3 extra edges on all of these sides around here. So I'm going to select all of these edges, Alt-C for the loop slice tool, and add 3 extra edges in. This edge loop now has 48 edges in it, which is the same number as this middle one, so I'm going to shift double click that, come up to the polygon menu, click bridge, and then right click. And you can see that everything joins up as it should. Now we're going to use this big polygon in the middle to create the 3rd cylinder that runs through the jack input. So I'm going to get the bevel tool, and I'm going to bevel it in slightly so we get that extra row of polygons around it. Insert it in again, and then shift it in a bit to create that bevel. I'm then going to pull it down inside that other cylinder. So I'm going to shift click to insert it again, shift click to pull it out, and this is where we're going to want to match that front reference. So I'm going to pull it out to about there, then shift click and pull it out again, but we want this polygon to be inset slightly, so I'm going to come back to a side view, And what we're looking for is to bring it in about a third of this distance here. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to shift click and come in another third. And then I'll shift click again and come in that last third there. Now that last poly needs to be shifted in slightly. And with that done, I'm going to shift click and pull it all the way inside of the pedal. I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and we'll take a look at what we've got. Now at the moment you can't see into the middle of the pedal because clearly this washer has faces that get in the way. So I'm going to select both of those. I'm then going to hit B for bevel and I'm going to inset these in until they're hidden beneath this six-sided shape here. And then hit delete. And with that done we can now see all the way down inside the jack input, which is what we want. Although I think I'm just going to grab these and move them back a little bit further. It's about there. And the only problem we have left is that if we bring back the main body layer, you'll see that the side of the main body blocks the jack input hole. So what we're going to do is use the loop slice tool to add in some extra edges around where the hole should be. We're then going to select that polygon and delete it so we can see all the way into the input. So I've added an extra edge into the right of our jack input using the loop slice tool, and I've repositioned some of these verts. So it's this one, and this one. So they're just hidden underneath the washer. Now with that done, I can select this polygon and hit delete. And we can see all the way into our jack input. So if we go and take a quick look at the refs, you can see that there's another jack input on this side. So instead of recreating it from scratch, we're just going to copy it into position. So I'm going to select it all, hit Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, and move it into place. Now we have the same problem as before, so we're going to have to add some extra edges so we can unblock that hole. But once we've done that, we can select this top jack input, like that. And then we're going to use the mirror tool to mirror it to the other side, so duplicate mirror. And mirror over on the x-axis, like that, which will match the right side ref. So we just have to unblock those holes and the jack inputs will be done. Now quickly before we go on, I just wanted to show you the layout of the extra edges I added. So I added an extra edge down here, and then I moved these verts so they're inside the washer, which gives us this polygon here. And then on this side I created this extra shape here, and then move these verts into position underneath the washer to give us these polys, which I'm just going to delete. And we can now see all the way into our jack inputs. With that done, all that remains is for us to slightly randomize it. So I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to rotate it on the X slightly, so it's a slightly different angle to this one. And with that done, I'm going to bring back the pedal top and save my scene. And with my scene saved, we're going to move on to creating this front label, which is actually a very, very simple object. So I've created a new mesh layer called front label. I'm then going to come up to the cube tool and just draw out the basic shape. And when you're happy with that, you can move it into position. Then hit space to drop the tool, and I'm going to go down and get that polygon and flip it around. And basically this label is just a very, very thin little object that goes on the front of the pedal, but it's just got enough of a thickness to it that it's worth modeling rather than using displacement. And I'm just going to extrude that back, and then I'm going to come in and select these four edges, and then I'm going to go to the back view and take a look at what we've got, and we just want to bevel these edges in with a round level of about 2. Actually maybe 3 for this one. Change that to 3. And come back to perspective mode, and I'm happy with that, so space to drop the tool. I'm then going to select both of these edges and double click to select the edge loops, and you'll notice that this edge loop doesn't select, so I'm going to select the edge next to it and double click again, which gets that one. It's just a little funky thing that Modo sometimes does, but with them both selected, I'm going to hit B for bevel and bevel them with a round level of 0. Maybe not quite that much. Yeah, about that. Then I'm going to rotate my views to look at the back of the label, inset this polygon slightly and delete it. Then come back to the front, and I'm going to select this one and inset it slightly, and then shift click to inset it again, and without deselecting I'm going to come up to the vertex menu and just click on join averaged. And that brings us to the end of the second part of this tutorial.